problem number 13, we have a kind of complex word problem. So I'm not going to bother rewriting this on the board, but have you follow along with the question. So we know that we have a function, and it says it's ax squared plus bx plus c. So we just know that's any parabola. It's any quadratic equation. We don't know what any of the coefficients are, though. But we know that the tangent lines at 1 and -1 have slopes of -8 and -1. So what we need to do before we continue with anything else in the problem is figure out what that means given this function. So we don't know the value of a, b, or c. But we know that if we took the derivative, they're just constants, so we can still do that. So if we took f prime of x, just treat a, b, and c as any constant. You don't know what it is. So the derivative of ax squared would just be 2ax. And the derivative of bx would be b. The derivative of c would be 0 because it's a constant. So given this function, its derivative is always just going to be 2ax plus b. The other thing we know is that the point 2, 15 is on the graph. So that tells us that f of 2 must equal 15. So you can see here what we're going to end up with is a bunch of equations and a bunch of variables, and then we're just going to have to solve. So let's use the next part, that the tangent lines at 1 and -1 have slopes of -8 and -1. So what that tells us is that f prime of -1 and f prime of 1 have very specific values. The tangent line, the slope of the tangent line at x equals 1 has a slope of -8, and the slope of the tangent line at x equals -1 is -1. So we have 3 points, 2 of which, though, are on the derivative. So now we just use that right here. So this tells us we know if we plug in -1 for x, it has to equal -1. So let's try that. So -1 equals, if x is -1, this would be -2a plus b. So there's one equation that we have. If we plug in 1 to the derivative, we're supposed to get -8. Again, remember, that's because we were told the slopes of the tangent lines at certain values of x, and that always means the derivative is the slope of the tangent line. So if we plug in 1 for x, we have to equal -8. Plugging in 1 for x would give us just 2a plus b. So we have a system of equations here. But we have one that's very easy to solve because we already have two values that are opposite, -2a and 2a. So if we added this system together, these would cancel out, and we would get 2b is equal to -9 by adding -1 and -8, which means b has to be -9 over 2. If b is -9 over 2, let me circle that so we know that for the future, we can definitely figure out a by just plugging back into one of these equations. So let's do that here. I'll use the top one because that will be simpler. We know that -1 equals -2a plus b. So b is -9 over 2. All right, so let's solve for a there. To solve for a, we'll add 9 over 2 over to this side. So remember that -1 would be -2 over 2, but we're adding 9 over 2. So that's going to give us 7 over 2 equals -2a. And therefore, if we divide by -2, we get that a is -7 over 4. So we get that b is -9 over 2, a is -7 over 4. So to figure out the last thing, what are the values of a, b, and c, we have to figure out what c is. But we can finally figure out what c is by using our last condition that we didn't use yet, which means if we plug in 2 for x to the original function, we have to get 15. And now that we know what a and b are, we can do that. So if we do that, that means 15 has to equal, because our whole function has to equal 15, ax squared. So a is -7 over 4, and x we know is 2. We're plugging in 2 throughout this whole thing, which would be 4. So we get 4 times -7 over 4. So that would be -7. Plus bx, again x is 2. B is negative 9 over 2. So negative 9 over 2 times 2 is going to give us negative 9. And finally, plus C, that's what we don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out. So as you can see, this is now another pretty simple algebra equation. Negative 7 and negative 9 would be negative 16. So if we add that over, we would get 31 for C. So our values of A, B, and C are negative 7/4, negative 9/2, and 31 in order for all of these conditions that we were given to be true.
The Teaching Center, UF's Learning Resource Center.